Welcome to Now Daily. I'm Robert Crawford. Here's what's happening now. We're talking about Brexit, right? This happened last Thursday. The United Kingdom voted and they won. About 52% of the United Kingdom population basically decided that it would be best for them to leave the United Kingdom. Why does this matter? Why does it have any effect on anything at all? Well, let's look a little deeper on what the European Union is, why the United Kingdom decided to leave, and kind of the repercussions of that. Let's first look at what the European Union actually is and how it was formed. So I'm going over to Wikipedia. Of course, I highly recommend that you look up different sources. This is just a brief overview. It's pretty basic factual information. The European Union is basically an economic union made up of 28 member states in Europe. Basically, it represents a population of about 508 million. The United States population is somewhere around 330 million, so it's slightly larger than the United States. It was basically created after World War II to kind of centralize the power of Europe. On the outskirts, it seems like a good idea, right? A European Union seems similar to what the United States did for all the 50 states in America. The United States allows free trade, free travel. It makes the states all one body. The European Union is a little different. But basically, when you look on the outside of it, if you just look at the media and what they're telling you that the European Union is, it sounds great. It sounds like the United States. The European Union, according to this, is basically an internal single market to standardize systems of laws that apply to all member states. The EU policies aim to ensure free movement of people, goods, services, and capital within the internal market, enact legislation in justice and home affairs, and maintain common policies on trade, agriculture, fisheries, regional development, and a passport system to basically make it easy to travel in between the nation states. Sounds great. I think we can all agree that something like this, free movement within nation states that are neighboring each other, is probably good. Free trade within them, whether it's agriculture, fisheries, regional development, is probably good. But when you look a little deeper, you realize that the European Union as it is right now is not a good system. The EU operates through a hybrid system of supranational and intergovernmental decision making. Let's put this in plain English. The European Union is made up of bureaucrats and elite politicians that are not voted into office at all, that are basically appointed to their positions, and the individual citizens of the nation states basically have no say on any of the rules and regulations of the European Union at all. So basically, the European Union is an unelected governmental body that's regulating and taxing the people of Europe. Is it any question why the United Kingdom will want to leave that system? I'm a bit surprised that 48% of them wanted to stay. It's probably just because they either didn't understand how the system works, and I'm sure that's why some people voted to leave it. They probably don't really understand how it works too. They just thought it was trendy. Or they really understand how it works and they're fed up with it, or they're part of the globalist system. These politicians, of course, want this. This gives them unprecedented power with no accountability. You can't sue the European Union. You can't sue them or go after them for criminal penalties. So basically, it's an unelected government body. It's like the United States. But at least in the United States, we have some small resemblance of voting. Very small nowadays. And I think people are seeing that, especially on the Democratic side. If you're a Bernie Sanders supporter, you're realizing that the system's rigged, right? Hillary definitely does not have the majority of support, but through the bought-out media and through a number of tricky election and delegate regulations and rigging, they've secured her spot basically for the front runner. But at least in America, we have this idea that we have freedom and that we're represented, right? We had the American Revolution because we were being taxed and regulated without representation. It's the same thing that's going on in Europe right now. And that's why the United Kingdom decided to leave it. And I think it's a great thing. Because what it shows me is that there's a trend going back to individual freedom and away from giant bureaucratic globalists, basically. And this isn't stopping. The globalists are going to fight tooth and nail to keep the United Kingdom in that system. Just because they voted to leave does not mean that they're going to get the opportunity to leave. The European Union actually controls its own army, unlike NATO, which is actually a treaty system between the nation states within NATO and their armies. The European Union can actually supersede regulations of the nation states and force their people to go to war on the European Union's behalf. Most of you probably don't realize that this is part of a much larger scheme that's been going on for over 100 years. And it starts with the bankers. It all comes back to the central bankers. Obama has signed off in the last few years, giving the central banks, the IMF, the World Bank of Settlements, control over the central banks, the Federal Reserve System, the Central Bank of England. These banks are now controlled. Their policies are dictated to them from the large globalists, the IMF, the World Banks. They are dictating how they want the interest rates to be, what they're going to do. The Federal Reserve has some say, but the Federal Reserve is a private banking system. The president has no power over the Federal Reserve. We can't even audit this thing and know where all the money is going. So let's look at how Brexit has affected the markets right now. If you just look on this Bloomberg article that came out on Friday, the day after the Brexit vote, when the markets opened, what happened? People got scared. They got away from the pound. The pound took a beating. It lost over 10% of its value compared to the dollar. Very surprised that the dollar is still the reserve currency. And we're seeing a lot of moves to get rid of that from nation states like Russia, Brazil, China, India, creating the BRICS system. They're trying to go back to a gold and silver standard. This video is not fully about gold and silver, but we have to touch on it because what jumped out of everything going down, what actually went up on Friday? Gold. Gold jumped, at the end of the day, it was about $65 an ounce. But at the height of the day, it was up about $100 an ounce. Right now, gold is sitting over $1,300 an ounce. Let's look at gold. Why are people going to gold? Gold is the security. When people are afraid of their stocks, bonds, commodities, and currencies are different than money because it's not a store of value. Currencies like the dollar are printed out of thin air by the central banks. When people lose confidence, they flood back into safe assets. That could be real estate, cash flow real estate, but historically it's been gold and silver because historically gold and silver has been money for thousands of years. An ounce of gold has stayed the same. And if you think inflation's only at 3%, you're kidding yourself. In 1933, FDR confiscated, with an executive order, all gold coins by the United States citizens, basically forcing a citizen of the United States to turn in their ounce of gold. Let's say they had 1 ounce of gold in a coin format, American Eagle, Buffalo. They had to turn that in to a Federal Reserve System bank. So they had to literally walk into Bank of America, give them an ounce of gold, and they got $20 in exchange in 1933. That ounce of gold has not changed at all. That same ounce is now worth over $1,300. That's your inflation. That's what the central banks are doing. They're printing money out of thin air. We're basically playing a game of Monopoly where they're the ones that are the bankers and they control the money. So when they run out of money, they can create more of it for free out of nothing. Yet when you run out of money, you're out of luck. You got to go find some. You got to go work for it. You have to go scrounge around, which is why over 75 million people in America are on food stamps, known as EBT debit cards. That's a whole other story that we need to get into. But let's get back to Brexit and how this affects it. If you look at Drudge Report today, it's all about Brexit right now. The globalists are scrambling to try to figure out how to force the United Kingdom to stay. What are the globalists? The globalists are basically any politician, businessman, or bureaucrat that is for a global system. And these global systems are, again, superseding nation states, just like the European Union. About 10 years ago, George Bush and his cronies had a big push for what was the American Union. And they also are trying to form the Pacific Union. In 2005, they even passed the law in Congress that eventually got shot down, luckily, but they tried to pass a law to enact the Amero, which was the North American version of the Euro, and they tried to merge Canada, United States with Mexico. That's why the UN is requiring open borders right now. The UN is requiring gun control in the United States. It all stems back to these globalists. They want a centralized system of unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats controlling and regulating every aspect of our lives and taxing us basically to oblivion. And the United Kingdom at least put their foot down and said, we're not going to go for it. I really hope everyone else wakes up and realizes what's going on. Now, I bet you they're not even going to be able to leave the European Union. They're going to force their hands. It's going to cause a big mess, which is why you're seeing this turmoil. The S&P today cut the UK credit rating to a AA from a AAA. So what are they doing? Well, the banks are using what they have at their disposal. They're using their credit system that they've created. It's fake. It's made up. Debt is made up. We have almost $20 trillion of federal debt in the United States. It's made up. It's printed out of thin air. It's used for these wars. It's used to fund the EBT cards and the immigration and everything that's going on. But at the end of the day, it's made up. It's numbers, ones and zeros in a computer. That's what they have on us. That's what they have against us. That's what they're using to stop us from forming together and pushing for our individual freedoms. We need the individual to be free, and voluntary partnerships will form. I'm all for world order as long as it includes voluntary participation, not forced participation by gunpoint. Bank shares are crashing, EUs are crashing, the globalists are basically spiraling out of control, but you have to ask, they probably have a lot of control over the voting system in the UK. Did it just by chance get out of their control and they lost this vote? Or did they want this to happen? That's my question. Was the Brexit part of a plan to try to destroy the current system to bring in a new one? What we need to be careful of is electing bureaucrats or putting bureaucrats and treaties into place that have no accountability. This is Now Daily. I'm Robert Crawford. Comment below. Let me know what's going on. Again, look into gold. I think we're going to see gold continue to rise as the rest of the market gets put into turmoil. I think you're going to see stocks, especially for the banks and other corporations that are affected by the European Union, go down. We're going to see people flooding into gold to protect their assets, especially when other currencies are basically a guessing game at this point, because all currencies are basically a fiat currency. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Again, I think if Brexit was real, if this really is a vote to leave the European Union, it's a vote in the right direction, and we need to get back to individual freedom. I'm Robert Crawford. This is Now Daily. Go to nowdaily.com. Comment below to let me know if you know anything more about Brexit, your thoughts on where we're going as a world, a country, a citizen, and as an individual, and what we can do to fight back. Because our biggest weapon right now is information and the control of our own spending. Spend your money wisely. Spend it in places that you believe in, not with these giant corporations that are pushing for these supernatural government bodies to regulate us with no accountability.